Hi, and welcome to Discovering Dataflex with me, Johan Brodfeldt. Today we're going to build a new application from scratch, and that is because there are many things going on in the world today, and one of them is NIS2, and even though it doesn't directly affect us, it is a good thing to kind of tidy up your documentation and all the information you have in your company. So we're going to build an application that can replace a bunch of our documents and Excel sheets and all of these things to keep a better overview over what we have and stuff like that. And what better name to give this application than Argus, the Greek giant, the all-seeing Greek giant. And we are not going to build this in the standard way you build a Dataflex application, where you decide that, okay, we want one table for servers and one table for systems and so on. We actually want to make this very dynamic, and that is not the way you usually do it in Dataflex, but we're going to try and see if we can tweak Dataflex to do it anyway. So we're going to start out by creating a resource table and an attributes table, and that's what we are going to work with. So to start with, we want to create a workspace, and I have the new Dataflex 25. So let's call it workspace Argus, and we can place it there, that's fine. And now we want to manage connection, Argus, and then we copy the path to the database, because if we click here, it's going to take forever to find it. And that works. And then we want to create a new database as well. And now we have created the database. Okay. What we're going to do is create a new table, and I'm going to call it resource. It's not going to be a recnom table, because I get the feeling that we're moving more and more towards Dataflex using the full SQL database and not managing these. And by default, it's not checked, so we're going to stick with that. We want an ID, and in here we want a name of our resource, and we want to know if this is a template, because we are going to have templates as well that is not resources, but we might add multiple Linux servers, and there are some attributes that you want on a Linux server, and there might come some regulation that says that, oh, on Linux and Windows servers, you also need to keep track of this number or the IP address or something. And then we want to be able to add that to the template, so that in the actual resource, we can see that this is missing. Template ID, so that we can reference back to the actual template. And now I'm not gonna press save, because then I might crash this. So let's start by adding some ideas. I'm going to create a new index for the name. There it is. So when I uncheck this, at least when it was a relation, that relation stopped working. So I'm going to stick with the old-fashioned way of doing it for now. So where we add an ID, this still says unique, but it is not unique because it's unique on the ID, which is already unique. And we're gonna add another index, one for the is template, because we're gonna want to filter on that one as well at some point. This one is not related to anything, so we can save that. All right, so we got our first table. Now we want to have a table called attribute. So we create a new table, attribute, and the attribute should have an ID as well. It should have a resource ID and a type ID, and the type I'm thinking is if it's a checkbox, if it's a date, if it's a form, if it's a combo box or something. So we are going to specify some different options for input values. And then we want a label and a value that we can have as text. 500 should be good enough for starters. Oh, don't press save. Index ID. And then we want an index on the resource. And here is where it went wrong, because I can show you later, but when I use the index is unique and didn't have the ID here, then it only showed the first item in the list. That took some time to figure out. And then type ID, we want to be able to search on that, perhaps no plus, and a label. Yes, yes, and that worked fine. What we want to add now is the relationship up to the resource. So we have a resource ID in our table that relates to the resource. And defining this will help us immensely when we write the application later on. And then we save that. Yeah, good. There's also another thing we want to do, and that is we might have a bunch of servers, but we're also going to store some systems, and we want to go into a system and know what server that system is running on. And we want to be able to go into a server and see what systems are running on that server. So we want to create one more table before we continue with building this application. And that is the related resource table. And that's going to have a parent resource ID, numeric 10, and a child resource ID. And it's going to have a index on both of them, like so. Sometimes I like to also add the child first and parent second, just because I might go both ways, and depending on how I use the indexes, it might be good to look up one or the other. So save that. All right. I think that's, no, we're also gonna have to set up some relationships here. And this is going to be from the parent to the resource ID. And then we want a relationship. And now we cannot relate to the resource again. So we need to do one more thing before we can actually execute this resource table, and that is to create an alias table. And we cannot create an alias table unless we have a data dictionary on here. So we have to create a data dictionary, and we cannot create a data dictionary before we have a project. So we need to start by creating a project. And this time we're going to create a Flextron project because this data, we want to have it running on a server somewhere. We don't have it published on the internet, even though we could have it on an internal intranet or something. But this Flextron is a pretty new thing in Dataflex, so of course we want to play around with it and see how it works. And it's web-based, so if we at some point want to switch from this Flextron version to a web version, that's going to be quite easy because it's using the same components and things. So that's what we're going to use now. Let's call it Argus as well. So now we have a template application, and if we run it, we can see what it looks like. Here we go. So it's an application with some tiles and a menu. This is the default template. And now we can create a data dictionary for the resource. We also want a data dictionary for the related resource, so we can just add these while we're at it. And the attribute, add a new data dictionary. There we go. And let's go back in here. Open our related resource table and relationships. And now we want to add that final one that goes to the no, we didn't add the template, the alias table. Child resource. There you go. So now we have a. Is it updated? No, we need to probably switch something here and add a new. There we have the child resource. So we're gonna link this child resource ID to the ID of the child resource, which is the same table. It's just an alias of that table. All right. Now we want to build some application, right? So let's start by creating a new Zoom wizard. So in this first example, we're just going to make a simple view where we can add some templates. So we're going to call this resource template Zoom. That. And this is going to be a header detail, and we have the attribute and the resource. And the reason that the system knows this is because we have configured our data dictionaries and our relationships correctly. So the system just knows what to do with this. We want the resource name, and in the list we want the type ID, label, and value. Next. And this is not going to do anything when we navigate. Yeah, we'll update those later as needed. So now we have a view, but we need a way to get to the view, so we need to create a list as well. And that is a model select. And this is a resource template. I want to call it list, even though the standard seems to be select. Resource name. and we only want to navigate to a zoom view, and we can find the zoom view here because it's our resource template zoom that we just created. And now we're almost done. So now we can try a new thing in Dataflix, which is the navigation designer. And here we can see our zoom view and our list. So now we want to have a link from the dashboard down to the list, and it put it on tile 2 on this one. Might want to move it, but it's not going to be called tile 2 anyway. Template resources. And what will happen if we run this? Now we have a tile with the template resources. We can click in here. We have no resource, but we should be able to add one. Let's say a Linux server and save it. So here it is. And now we should be able to add another one called Unix or Windows server. But it doesn't work because we don't have the right key. And normally in Dataflix, we go into the table and we go in, check the resource table. We say that the ID should be a have an auto increment, and we create a system table. But the thing is that the database can do these things for us. So I would rather have the database do these things. So what I'm going to do is see in our attributes, I go in here and I create 2, and I do the same for the resource. Create 2, and then I go and delete these. Because we're going to create them in a new way. Identity, and identity columns do not have default values, so we can delete, or we need to delete that one. We run this, and now this one is added. Call this identity. Might also want to change this to an integer, but let's leave it as a number for now. There you go. And when we now go back and try to run our application, it's obviously empty. So let's try to add the Linux server. Cannot re-find record. Okay. So there might be something with indexes. See if we can re-index these things. Re-index. Oh, there's something wrong here. Okay. Open resource. Oh, we're not allowed to open it. Okay. So what I figured out is that if we go in here to the data and take the attribute and resource int and just delete the indexes that we have defined and the resource, and we should be able to go back to our application. And this one, we might want to stop that one just for good measure. Open table, resource and attribute, open. And then we have to go back in and reset our indexes. ID, new index, resource ID, new index type ID, and a new index label ID. Save, yes. Okay, that worked. Now the same for resource, index ID, add an index, name, ID, add an index, is template, ID, save, yes. Trying to run the application now. Template, now we have our Linux server, and it is actually saved. So let's see if we can save a Windows server as well. Yeah, so now we have 2 servers. But now we want to add things to the list here. And you cannot really do that because it is a list view. And we want to use a grid instead, because that we can actually modify. And we don't want to navigate anything when we click on the row. So we just comment that out and try to run it again and see if we are able to add. Yeah. We have to use grid here as well. And now if I go into a Linux server, I can go in here and click edit. And this should be type 1, whatever that might be, and then version 0.0 is the default version, and then we can add for 2 is what we're going to call it, review date for the next review. And then save that. And then we're going to go in here and we want to type, edit this one as well. 1, and this should have a version 0.0. And then we have a 2, and this must have a license expiration, what have you. And we might not save a default, it's just a type null for now. So if we go in here, we can see the defaults. If we go in here, we can see the defaults for that. Oh, we didn't say that, the last line. 2 license null save. Yeah, there it is. So now we have an application where we can store some values in a database and read them and update them. So I think this is where we stop this video, because we've gone from nothing to a basic data entry application. And if you are curious to see where this is going, I encourage you to subscribe and then tag along, because we're going to do a bunch of fun things here. And with that, I see you in the next one. Bye bye.